When we think of Vikings, we often envision horn-helmeted warriors raiding coastal villages. But behind those legendary raids was something far more impressive: an extraordinary ability to survive in conditions that would kill most modern humans within days. While our ancestors faced the harsh North Atlantic with nothing but handcrafted tools and generational knowledge, most of us today panic when our phone battery drops below 20%. Here's the hard truth. The same survival skills that carried Vikings across uncharted oceans could mean life or death in a real crisis today. We've grown so dependent on modern conveniences that we've forgotten how to endure without them. The Vikings didn't just survive, they thrived, exploring from North America to the Middle East using techniques that today's world has nearly lost. It's time to reclaim that knowledge, because one day you might need it. The image of Vikings charging into battle with gleaming axes and swords makes for good television, but the reality was far more practical. A Viking warrior's survival depended not on Hollywood heroics, but on something decidedly unglamorous: meticulous weapon maintenance. In the harsh Nordic environment, a poorly maintained blade wasn't just ineffective, it was a death sentence. Salt water from sea voyages could reduce a finely crafted sword to a rusted relic in mere weeks. Vikings developed specific techniques for preserving metal in environments where moisture was constant and unavoidable. A Viking would rather go hungry than let his blade go uncared for. Notes archaeological evidence from burial sites, where warriors were interred with maintenance tools alongside their weapons. They used natural oils, often rendered from animal fat, to create protective barriers against oxidation. Evidence shows they would regularly heat their blades and apply these oils, creating a semi-polymerized coating that protected the metal. But what happens when your carefully maintained weapon breaks during battle? This is where Viking improvisation became legendary. Archaeological findings at battle sites reveal something surprising. Alongside crafted weapons were implements of war created from common materials found in the environment. One particularly inventive technique involved fire-hardening wooden spears. By carefully charring the tips of wooden poles without burning them completely, Vikings created improvised weapons nearly as effective as their metal counterparts for piercing leather armor. The process required precise control of temperature. Too much heat would weaken the wood. Too little would leave it ineffective. Perhaps most remarkable was the Viking approach to battlefield first aid. Unlike other warrior cultures that focus solely on victory, Norse fighters developed practical techniques for survival after combat. They carried special moss varieties known for their absorbent and antimicrobial properties to pack wounds. Archaeological evidence shows they used particular stitching patterns for closing injuries that modern medicine has confirmed minimize scarring and infection risk. One recovered Viking text describes a technique where honey, a natural antimicrobial, was applied to wounds before binding. Modern studies have confirmed honey's effectiveness against numerous pathogens, proving once again that Viking survival wisdom was millennia ahead of its time. Imagine setting sail into the vast North Atlantic with no GPS, no compass, and no weather forecast. For most of us, this scenario is unthinkable. For Vikings, it was Tuesday. The navigational prowess of Norse explorers has baffled historians for centuries. How did they cross thousands of miles of open ocean to discover new lands when modern sailors with full instrumentation still occasionally get lost? The answer lies in a combination of careful observation and tools so elegant in their simplicity that modern scientists are still studying them. The most famous of these is the sunstone, a crystal, likely Iceland spar, that polarizes light and allows its user to locate the sun even on cloudy days. By holding the crystal up to the sky and rotating it until a specific pattern appeared, Vikings could determine the sun's position with remarkable accuracy. Experiments with reconstructed sunstones have shown they can locate the sun's position within 1 degree of accuracy, comparable to a modern compass. But technology was only part of their navigational system. Vikings developed an intimate understanding of natural patterns that most modern humans have forgotten how to read. The birds flying north in the morning and south in the evening tell you where land lies. notes one recovered Viking text. They tracked specific seabirds, whose feeding patterns reliably indicated proximity to shore, sometimes from over 100 miles away. When puffins appeared overhead, land was typically within a day's sailing. Vikings read watercolor and wave patterns to detect hidden underwater features and distant land, recognizing that certain clouds formed over islands beyond the horizon. Without written charts, they relied on mental mapping, memorizing routes through oral tradition using days' sail measurements and natural waypoints like sun position and bird colonies. Firemaking was another survival cornerstone. Vikings carried iron strikers, flint, and specially prepared fungi for quick ignition, but their true advantage lay in fire maintenance. Rather than starting fires from scratch, they transported smouldering embers in moss-filled containers, ensuring a reliable heat source for days. Archaeological finds even reveal metal fire containers used aboard wooden ships, a crucial safeguard against hypothermia. Modern survivalists now recognize the efficiency of Viking fire-carrying techniques, which conserve time and energy in harsh conditions. As survival expert Eric Kulik observes, the Viking method would save lives in modern scenarios. The Vikings lived in a world where a failed hunt or spoiled food stores meant starvation. Their survival depended on hunting techniques so effective they could harvest sufficient protein in environments where modern hunters often return empty-handed, and preservation methods so reliable they could keep food edible through months-long winters without refrigeration. Viking hunters employed a principle modern trackers call environmental narrowing, identifying locations where terrain naturally channels animal movement, creating predictable patterns. They positioned hunting parties at these bottlenecks, rather than pursuing prey across open terrain, conserving energy while increasing success rates. Their tracking skills were equally sophisticated. Viking hunters could identify not just what animal had passed through an area, but its age, health condition, and how recently it had traveled through. They read subtle indicators most modern humans would overlook: the specific angle of disturbed moss, the compression pattern in snow, or the height of broken twigs. The deer that feeds on mountain ash leaves a different mark than one that prefers pine needles, and moves with a different stride, notes one recovered text, demonstrating a level of observational detail that put them ahead of their time. The weapons they employed were specialized for specific prey and environments. While popular culture focuses on the battle axe, hunting spears with specialized tips allowed for different throwing distances and penetration depths depending on the targeted animal. Bow designs varied between coastal and inland regions, with distinctive arrow fletching patterns optimized for each environment's typical wind conditions. In addition, Vikings mastered food preservation to survive brutal winters. Fermentation, their most powerful technique, created an acidic, bacteria-resistant environment, seen in hakal or fermented shark, and the controlled Surmataka method, which used precise salt levels for long-term storage. Cold smoking, using antimicrobial woods like juniper and alder, further extended shelf life. Excavations reveal advanced storage pits with drainage systems, temperature regulation, and natural cooling features. Crucially, Vikings never relied on a single method, ensuring food security through layered preservation strategies, an approach still relevant for survival today. In an age before meteorological satellites and Doppler radar, Vikings developed weather forecasting systems so sophisticated that modern scientists are still uncovering their accuracy. Their survival, particularly during sea voyages and raids, depended on predicting dangerous weather patterns before they developed. While we check our smartphone weather apps, Vikings read the sky with a precision that would put many modern forecasters to shame. They recognized specific cloud formations that reliably preceded storms by 24 to 48 hours. The appearance of thin, wispy cirrus clouds moving from west to east served as an early warning system for approaching weather systems. When the clouds resemble fish scales, prepare your vessels for rough seas within 2 days, instructs one recovered Viking Age text. Modern meteorology confirms this mackerel sky, altocumulus clouds with a distinctive pattern, indeed, typically precedes stormy weather by 36 to 48 hours. Beyond the skies, Vikings maintained a complex observational network that included animal behavior, plant responses, and subtle environmental shifts. They noticed that seabirds' feeding patterns changed dramatically 12 to 24 hours before storms. When gulls began feeding more aggressively and flying lower to the water, experienced Norse sailors would seek safe harbor. Archaeological evidence reveals that coastal Viking settlements had elevated weather observation points to track wave patterns and cloud formations. Their forecasting relied on multiple indicators: closing flowers before rain, shifting smoke behavior with pressure changes, and altered sound travel before storms. Most impressive was their grasp of seasonal cycles, using calendrical systems to predict long-term weather trends essential for agriculture. For modern survival situations, the Viking approach to weather forecasting offers valuable lessons. Their system required no technology, just careful observation and pattern recognition. They understood something we often forget. Nature broadcasts advance warnings of changing conditions to those patient enough to notice. When a Viking raider suffered a deep wound hundreds of miles from home, there were no hospitals, no antibiotics, and no advanced medical care. Yet archaeological evidence shows many survived injuries that would be life-threatening even with modern treatment. Their sophisticated approach to wilderness medicine combined practical techniques with an advanced understanding of plant pharmacology that researchers are still unraveling today. Viking medicine began with a practical foundation: stopping blood loss. They developed specialized moss dressings, particularly sphagnum moss, that modern testing has shown absorbs up to 20 times its weight in fluid, while releasing compounds that inhibit bacterial growth. This natural bandage was so effective that similar moss preparations were used by field medics as recently as World War I, when gauze supplies ran short. For wound closure, Vikings used horsehair sutures and specialized needle techniques. Archaeological evidence shows they practiced a suturing method remarkably similar to modern surgical techniques, where the needle penetrates at different depths on opposite sides of the wound, a technique that minimizes scarring and reduces infection risk. Viking healers stood out for their advanced pharmacological knowledge, using plant-based remedies now validated by modern science. They treated wounds with yarrow, which contains anti-inflammatory and coagulant properties. Angelica was used for respiratory and digestive issues, later found to have antibacterial and antiviral effects. Birch bark, rich in betulinic acid, served as a potent antimicrobial for infected wounds. Archaeological findings from Viking settlements include specialized preparation tools for these medicines: grinding stones with residue of specific medicinal herbs, specialized containers for preparing infusions, and evidence of cultivation areas dedicated to medicinal plants. What's particularly notable about Viking healing practices was their systematic approach to infection prevention. In an era when the germ theory of disease was millennia away, Norse healers somehow recognized that wound cleanliness directly impacted healing. They practiced wound irrigation with boiled seawater, now known to have mild antiseptic properties, and applied honey dressings, which modern medicine has rediscovered as effective against antibiotic-resistant bacteria. For the festering wound that grows hot and red, apply the juice of crushed garlic and wrap in clean cloth soaked in boiled wine, instructs one recovered healing text. Modern analysis confirms garlic contains allicin, a powerful antimicrobial compound, while the alcohol in wine would have provided additional antiseptic properties. Their diet, too, reflected advanced nutritional understanding. During winter months, when fresh food was scarce, Vikings deliberately consumed fermented foods, now known to contain probiotics that support immune function. They cultivated specific herbs like rosemary and thyme that modern research has shown contain compounds that help preserve vitamin C in stored foods, helping prevent scurvy during long winter months. When modern campers face unexpected overnight conditions, they often panic, and for good reason. Exposure kills faster than almost any other wilderness threat. Vikings, however, mastered the art of creating effective shelter in environments so hostile that modern survival experts consider them nearly uninhabitable without specialized equipment. Archaeological evidence from temporary Viking encampments reveals sophisticated shelter designs that balanced rapid construction with remarkable insulation properties. Unlike the elaborate longhouses of their permanent settlements, expedition shelters followed a principle modern survivalists call minimal adequate shelter, the smallest structure that provides necessary protection while requiring minimal resources to construct. Viking raiders and explorers carried specific tools dedicated to shelter construction. Specialized axes for quick timber processing, compact digging implements for site preparation, and woven panels that could serve as both sailcloth and shelter material. This multi-purpose approach meant their equipment served multiple functions without adding unnecessary weight, a principle modern ultralight backpackers have only recently rediscovered. What made their shelter approach particularly effective was site selection. Vikings understood microclimate dynamics centuries before the term existed. They identified locations where terrain features created natural wind barriers, where southern exposures maximized solar gain, and where ground conditions minimized heat loss through conduction. Place your shelters back to the wind and its door to the midday sun, with stone beneath if the ground holds water, instructs one recovered text. This simple guidance embodies sophisticated thermodynamic principles that modern survival experts still teach today. Vikings mastered insulation using local materials, layered branches with sod, compressed dry grass, and banked earth, achieving thermal efficiency comparable to modern methods. They optimized interior heat by strategically placing fires and using stone reflectors to direct warmth. Specialized pit designs minimized fuel use, crucial in wood-scarce regions. In extreme climates, semi-subterranean structures leveraged Earth's stable temperature, maintaining warmth even in -30 degrees Fahrenheit or -34 degrees Celsius conditions. Their shelters also featured ventilation systems that expelled moisture while retaining heat, preventing dangerous condensation. Modern survival instructors have begun studying Viking shelter techniques for contemporary applications. The genius of Viking shelter design wasn't sophisticated materials, but sophisticated understanding of environmental physics, notes survival expert Lars Monsen. They achieved with readily available materials what we now need specialized gear to accomplish. The Viking longship represents one of history's greatest survival technologies, a vessel so perfectly adapted to its environment that modern naval architects still study its design principles. What enabled these seafarers to cross thousands of miles of open ocean in vessels modern sailors would consider dangerously exposed wasn't just courage, but a sophisticated understanding of materials, hydrodynamics, and preventative maintenance. At the heart of Viking shipbuilding was a revolutionary construction technique called clinker building, where hull planks overlapped like roof shingles instead of meeting edge to edge. This seemingly simple innovation created vessels with a critical survival advantage: flexibility. Unlike rigid hulls that break under stress, Viking ships could flex with powerful North Atlantic waves, absorbing impact forces that would shatter more rigid designs. Archaeological analysis of recovered ships reveals sophisticated material selection processes. Vikings didn't just use any available wood, they selected specific trees grown in particular conditions. Oak from slow-growth forests provided structural elements with ideal density and grain patterns. Pines with straight, knot-free trunks supplied masts capable of withstanding tremendous wind forces without snapping. Choose trees that have bent with the same winds your ship will face, advised Norse shipbuilders, recognizing that natural stress adaptations in living trees translated to desirable properties in finished vessels. This observation anticipated by centuries what modern material science now confirms. Biological stress adaptation creates superior structural properties. Viking waterproofing was remarkably advanced, using pine tar and animal fat to create flexible, watertight seals. These mixtures were heated to precise temperatures for optimal penetration, a technique modern reproductions struggle to replicate. Their maintenance discipline was equally impressive. Practicing what modern engineers call predictive maintenance, they replaced worn components and applied preservatives based on environmental wear. Ship upkeep was a daily ritual, with morning inspections of hull integrity, structural elements, and steering systems, ensuring seaworthiness for months in punishing conditions. Viking sailors carried specialized repair tools, including wedges for sealing breaches and pre-shaped timber for quick fixes, components of a well-planned contingency system. Their survival at sea also depended on meticulous resource management. With efficient water conservation and food preservation techniques, crews could endure weeks on minimal supplies, proving their ships were more than transportation. They were complete survival systems. The Vikings thrived not through superhuman abilities, but through systematic knowledge, meticulous preparation, and adaptive problem-solving. Their true strength lay in observation and self-reliance, skills that modern specialization has largely replaced with dependence on convenience. In fact, some of their inventions were so ahead of their time that they continue to surprise us today. Curious to know what they are? Check out this video right here.